Okay guys, quick tutorial on how to add our character animations. So as an example, I've done Bellica. If I hit play here on the test level, she can run around, she turns when we turn, she can zoom in, zoom out, and you can pan all the way around the character and whatnot, look behind her and stuff, and move again. So if you're like looking like this, you start moving, she'll just start going in the direction you're facing. So it's a pretty simple animation, and it's a pretty simple way of doing movement. I think it'll work, so we'll go ahead and do it. All right, so I'm going to escape out of that. The way you would get to that is in Maps, Test Level, load the test level, and then you select the default pawn class, and you'll do whatever character you're working on. So we're going to work on Boris here. If we load this, he's just going to be stuck in a T pose, and he moves around. So zoom still works. He's like rolling around on rollerblades right now. It's amazing. Um, so basically, that's how you're going to test it. Now let's go ahead and give him his animation. So we go to player characters, go to Boris. Now, first things first is we have this mesh here. We actually want to delete this. The reason we want to delete it is because in the player character blueprints, I was referencing a local version of the mesh. I was copying them over from the Paragon folders, but we don't want to do that because we're going to actually have to copy over more than just the mesh to use it. So we're just going to stop doing that and do it the regular way. What we want to do is hit delete here and replace references. You want to select something to replace the references with. And if we just search for Boris here, we should find the right skeletal mesh. And you'll see that the path to that, Boris, the path to that was in the heroes slash Boris slash meshes. Now, if we do something like, I think Drongo has, yeah, Drongo, he's got multiple meshes here. Basically, you want to do the one that's in the meshes folder. So you'll see here it says game Paragon characters heroes Drongo meshes. That's the one we want. We don't want the one that's in skins, and we don't want this one. That must be like a duplicate for some reason. We want the one that's in the meshes folder in the Paragon folders. So for Boris, he just had one, so that makes it easy. So we hit replace references. Are you sure? Yes. It's going to close down your blueprint editor over here. Save selected. Then you can just reopen this up, and now this path should be the Heroes Boris Meshes Boris. So the mesh is correctly referencing the Paragon mesh in the Paragon Meshes folder. Perfect. If we play it, nothing's going to change. We're just referencing a different mesh now. So that's the only difference. Now, the first thing we want to do here is create an animation blueprint, and we want to search for a skeleton. This is why we had to change the mesh, because the skeleton the mesh looks at is important. So we're looking at this skeleton. So we want to use the Boris skeleton. You just search for whatever character you're doing, name it ANMBP, and then whatever character you're doing. So for me, it's Boris. ANMBP Boris, save. If you noticed, it had like a little asterisk down here. You need to save so that that goes away. You could also hit this save button here. Now we've got an output pose. This output pose, first of all, needs to reference the right slot in the skeleton, and the slot that we want. If we do slot, default slot, and then you can come change the default slot to upper body. That's the slot we want. Okay, then we want to point that's the source of that at a new state machine. So add add new state machine. There we go. And then we can rename the state machine. Geez, maybe. I guess we can just go up here. Rename the state machine. I don't know. State machine. What did I name it for? I know I did Greystone. What did I name it? Locomotion. Yeah, I think that's a common thing to call it. Locomotion. So this is like the forward, backwards, the movement based state machine. Locomotion. You might have a state machine for like arm movement, right? That's not locomotion. That's like a appendage, right? But the locomotion state machine that we added is going to point into the upper body slot, and that's going to point to the output pose. Now we want to go into the state machine, and we want to add a new state. So we just drag from the entry, add new state. We'll call it idle slash, or I don't think we can do slashes. Let's just do idle, um, idle jog, because you can either idle or jog. So maybe we could rename that to idle or jog. Idle or jog. Job. Oh my gosh. Nice. Okay, there we go. Idle or jog. There we go. Now what we're going to do, you can see this is active pretty much all the time. So we're going to go into that state now. I know we're going deep into this. You know, we've gone from the animation graph to the locomotion to the idle state. Now here, we don't want to do anything in the state yet. What we want to do is we want to go to the event graph. But maybe we actually will do this because basically the result of this state needs to come from a blend space. And that blend space needs to take in a variable, right? So let's go ahead and create that blend space. So we go to our player characters, Boris. Again, right click animation and then animation or blend space 1D. Again, search for Boris skeleton. There we go. And then we can just say BS for blend space, or maybe BS 1D Boris. That should be fine. Okay, now what we can do is we can reference that blend space. So we search blend space, we'll see blend space 1D Boris. The other ones I just did blend space, but we might have multiple blend spaces, so let's specify it's the 1D blend space. There we go. And now it's looking for a variable. And so we need to give it a variable. What we want is the speed. And the reason we want the speed is you'll see in just a second. We're going to go into this blend space. Now this blend space basically interpolates from 0 to its max. Now its max needs to match the max walking speed of our character movement, which is here in character movement, 600. So it's going to be 600 for you too. You don't need to go check that. You can just stay in the blend space and just come up here to max axis value and change that to 600. If you can't see it, it's under horizontal axis. You just expand that and you set its max value to 600. We could also rename the axis as speed to match the variable that we're going to be passing into it. And so now we have a 1D, basically a number line from 0 to 600. At 0, we want Boris to be idling. Now here's something. Additive and M type on idle is none. Let's see if this works. Now if we go to jog forward, FWD for forward, the additive and M type is none. So if it's not none, basically what you need to do is you need to go to, where's Boris? Oh, geez. Come here, Heroes, Boris, Animations. Find the animation you want. So for us, maybe idle wasn't additive. Come up here and search additive anim type, and it says no additive. I had one where it said local space. Make sure it's set to no additive for both the idle and the jog forward animations. But if that's already the case, then lucky you. So let's go ahead and go back to that blend space. And so basically we put an animation at 0, which is idle. We put an animation at 600, which is jog forward. And as we interpolate between those, you can see at near 600, he's jogging. And back here, he's just idling. And like here, he like can't figure out what he wants to do, right? To help prevent that in the actual level in the editor when we play, you can change this weight to something like 5. So it doesn't make much effect here, which is unfortunate. But basically what that weight is going to do is make it harder for him to be in these like middle states, right? He's pretty much going to go straight from nothing, his idle, to his run. He's just going to go right away because you have to like basically sit here at 300 for 5 seconds before this animation will kick in. Or not 5 seconds, but the weight, I don't know. A weight of 5 seems like a solid value, so we're just going to use that. It just makes it harder for him to be in these middle values. So he interpolates smoother to the 600 to the full jog there, which is what we want. So he's jogging forward and he has idle as well at 0. So that's what we want to do. We save that. So we've already set the blend space, the speed. Now we want to give it a speed. If we compile this, he's basically going to be idling because we're at 0. If we set it to 600 and we compile, now in his animation preview, he's jogging. But we don't want to set this manually. We want to give it an actual variable. So where we're going to do that is in the state's event graph. We'll delete what's here. And we want 2 events. We want the event blueprint initialize animation and the event blueprint update animation. In the initialize, we need to set some variables. In the update, we also need to update some variables. So basically what we're going to do, let's try to get the owning pawn. So owning pawn or pawn owner. Um, so an animation blueprint is owned by a pawn. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to get access to it. We're going to check if it's valid. Is valid. Oops, wrong is valid. You want to do the one with execution pins. So is valid. That's the question mark one. Now, if it is valid, we can just promote it to a variable. But if it's not valid, we just want to wait for a second. So delay, and we'll just delay for 0.2 seconds. And then after the delay, we'll check again. So basically, we're just going to be in a while loop until, I like to add this reroute node just to make it cleaner, but we're going to be in a while loop just checking if this pawn owner is valid yet. I would think it would be valid right away, but it's not. So this loop helps it, if it's not valid right away, well, wait 0.2 seconds, check again. And if we compile here, you can see that it's just super fast, checking if it's valid. Once it is valid, it's going to stop doing that. And we're just going to promote the pawn to a variable so we don't have to check anymore. So promote to variable, and the variable we want to call pawn, probably. That makes sense. So there we go. So if it's valid, we set the pawn variable. If it's not, we wait 0.2 seconds and we check again. And if you're not seeing these lines, you just need to, you probably have no debug object selected. You just want to have the preview instance selected. So once we do that, that means the pawn's going to be set. So that means we can go ahead and access it. We can get the pawn. We do need to check if it's valid. Oops, again, we want to do the one with execution pin. So is valid. And if it's not valid, we just don't care. We'll just wait for it to be valid from the initialization. But basically, if initialization gets called and then we're like waiting for it to be valid and an update gets called in the meantime, we're just going to ignore it. We're just going to wait until, because this gets called all the time, basically on tick. So we're just going to wait until it is valid. Once it is valid, then we want to get the velocity of the pawn, and we don't care about the direction of the character, we just care about their speed. And you get speed from velocity by getting the length of the vector, so vector length. And then we want to promote to the speed variable. So there we go. Go ahead and plug that into is valid, and this is what everything should look like right here in the event graph. Hopefully that made sense. If not, just make it look like this. Or even just literally, you can come copy paste this because nothing here is specific to the player. And then once you have speed, you just grab it, plug it into the blend space. So basically, we'll go back to the top. The output pose is asking for a slot. We gave it a slot. The slot is asking for an output pose. The output pose comes from this state machine. The state machine only has one state. It's idle or jog. The idle or jog comes from a blend space that interpolates from 0 to 600 based on this speed variable that we set over here in the event graph by getting an access to the pawn, and we do like a do while until we have a valid pawn, and once we do, we'll set the speed variable. And every time the animation wants to update, pretty much on tick, I think, it'll reset that speed variable, and so that comes into here, that goes into the blend space spits it out to the animation pose here, which then gets spit out here, which then comes out of here into the slot and then into the output pose so that the character knows how they should be moving. And again, he has no movement right now, so speed is 0, so he's just going to stand there in his idle animation. So if we go ahead and test this now, remember, so go to the test level, select the BP Boris default pawn. If you can't do that, make sure your game mode is GM test, and then you can select your BP pawn. So BP Boris is already selected. We hit play, and he's not able to do anything. That's odd. Hold on. What do we miss here? Save. Speed 600, 5. That's fine. The event graph. That's fine. This is the so it comes from the state machine. That should be fine. Did we not click, or no, click on the actual mesh, and oh, we didn't. Okay. So you have to come to the player character, the blueprint for the player character, hit the mesh, hit use animation blueprint, and then you want to select NMBP, whatever character you're working on. For us, Boris. I thought we did that forever ago. I guess we didn't. That's usually one of the first things I do. But now that the mesh knows which blueprint to use, here we go. We're using the right blueprint. He's in his idle state, and now he's running. And you saw how he didn't really twitch. He didn't really like, oh, I don't know what to do. He just kind of went from idling to running right away. So there we go. That's how you would add animations for all our characters. And wow, he's so big compared to the other ones. We just need to do that for all our characters. Super tedious, plus it's good for the homework, good for experience. So it'd be awesome if you guys could help. All right, thanks, guys.